Welcome, everyone, to the Institute of Museum and Library Services InformationLiteracy.gov training webinar. I'm Cindy Landrum, Acting Director of the Institute of Museum and Library Services. What brings us together today is a shared goal to enable communities across the nation to enrich their lives through resources and skills that help them to navigate an information-abundant world. This is not just the mission of IMLS as a single federal agency. In 2022, IMLS brought together more than 15 federal agencies with robust information literacy programs and assistance to form a federal information literacy task force as directed by Congress. Supporting local communities has been the focus of the task force engagement and its work. And by extension, local museums and libraries are uniquely situated as community learning spaces that address their community's unique information literacy needs. InformationLiteracy.gov is a result of the collaborative effort of IMLS and the task force to support you in your efforts to meet the information literacy needs in your community. It is my pleasure to hand off to my colleague, Catherine Moss, IMLS's Chief of Staff, whose leadership brings us to this point. Catherine.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for that introduction. My name is Catherine Moss, and I'm the Chief of Staff here at IMLS. I'm excited to be here today to share what is currently on the site and how you can use it to address community information literacy needs in a variety of ways. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Go. And I want to build on Cindy's introduction by starting with our About page here, which has more information about InformationLiteracy.gov, this initiative, and also the task force. As Cindy mentioned, this interagency task force is made up of agencies that provide comprehensive and robust information literacy programs and/or federal financial assistance like grants available to communities across the country for doing this type of work. You can read more about them here. So over the last 2 years, IMLS has worked with the task force to hold convenings and listening sessions to understand what type of resources and toolkits are available for this work and how we might pull them together in a way that makes sense and allows for multiple points of entry. We know that some of you have been working on information literacy related work for a number of years. For others, this may be brand new, or you may not even talk about what you do in terms of information literacy at all. So with this site, we aim to provide an approach to building information literacy, our Journey to Information Literacy page here, some shared definitions, and we know that definitions can be difficult to come to, so we are sharing our definitions, so we're all starting in sort of the same place. And then also resources and tools, which we'll go through all of this in more detail here. And all of this is intended to empower people in communities across the country to change how we understand, analyze, and use information about ourselves, our health, our finances, our use of the internet, and the world around us. So currently the site is directed at museum and library professionals, as you'll see in the header here, to support you all in this work in your communities. But the tools and resources available here can be used by other community leaders of other types tackling information literacy needs. The site currently focuses on 4 areas of literacy: information literacy, health literacy, financial literacy, and digital literacy, and now features over 100 resources on these topics, from lesson plans and programs to training resources and unique offerings such as a graphic novel about mis and disinformation, an interactive game about social media manipulation. We will be going through more of these tools and resources in much more detail throughout the remainder of this webinar, but I wanted to start with a brief overview of the navigation and layout of the site. So from the home page, you can navigate to the Journey to Information Literacy page, as well as training resources for professionals and community engagement materials. More on those later. The individual pages for information, health, financial, and digital literacy, as we already showed. And community spotlights. Click on this one. And these are intended to spark ideas and allow you to make connections to other practitioners. So the spotlight page provides each individual page provides details on successful information literacy programs. It has an overview and fast facts here. Some details about funding, size, type of community, and reach. There's a Q&A about addressing community needs, the program's funding and partnerships, measuring impact, and also advice on implementing a similar program, as well as contact information as well. So we're in the process of developing and posting more community spotlights very soon. You may note when you look through these current three, they're all fairly large, especially for those of you who are in the very small kind of space, small and rural kind of space in particular. So we are collecting more spotlights to showcase a wider variety of institutions and programs, sharing successful examples, lessons learned, and challenges faced from particularly those smaller and rural institutions and programs. One last important area before we dive into the individual literacy pages, I want to draw your attention to the resource database page here. This lists all of the resources available on the site. So you can scroll through, I won't scroll down since there's over 100, but you can scroll through the full list. You can search for all of the resources by keyword here at the top, and you can also filter for different types of literacy and also by the language of the resources. Throughout this work on the initiative, we have noted how vital it is to have a foundation of trust. And I know talking to some of you, that is very, very important in the work that you do in community. It is absolutely foundational. And we wanted to reflect that importance of trust and trustworthiness on the site itself by sharing here under resource evaluation, or I just went, how we collect and evaluate resources to be included on the site. So you'll note here, a primary source of resources is the task force, and you'll see that today. We have a guest speaker from the CDC. We also identify resources through online searches and talking to practitioners, but we'd also love to hear from you if you would like to recommend a resource or ask for particular areas of resources that you may not see that you're interested in having as well. And so for all of our potential resources, we use 5 general sets of criteria here. First, is it from a trustworthy source? Is the resource relevant to the work? Is it based on objective evidence? And is it tailored to its intended audience? And is it accessible? All of the resources included satisfy at least 3 of these 5 criteria, and regardless of where they land with the criteria, we talk about them and carefully consider each resource and whether it aligns overall with the purpose. And even if it doesn't meet all the criteria in the way that we would potentially like, is it still worth including because it's of high value in other areas? And I want to note one important item about the 5th criteria on here is whether it is accessible. Has a lot of different meanings to us and to you, I'm sure. But I just wanted to note the reference to open access and free resources here. We have highly prioritized making sure that the resources we link to are free and open access. But you will see a small number of resources that do require a free account of some kind or a modest fee. And we are continuing to make sure that we're minimizing resources that have those types of requirements, and also identifying when they do in the description. I'll show you an example of a description in a moment. If the resource does require an account or does have a fee, so that you know before you even click on it that will be required. So to kick off our discussion of the more specific literacy pages, I want to share the information literacy page here. So you'll see here for all 4 of these pages, the basic layout for these pages about specific types of literacy. There's a definition at the top, a discussion of why teaching these skills is important and the impact that it can have on people's lives. Then featured resource and more resources and toolkits organized roughly by type, including lesson plans and programs. I wanted to click on, let's see, yeah, there was another one I want to click on further on. So lesson plans and programs here, more resources, including, in this case, this is an EPA, it's the game of energy choices, which is an interesting one. I've got it open here. And it is a resource about exploring energy choices and thinking about understanding better environmental challenges and impacts on the environment. So that's one example of one of the maybe more unique ones. There are training resources for professionals on each of these landing pages, including data and maps in some cases to help understand literacy needs in your community, which can be really helpful and interesting depending on what you're working on. I want to call special attention to the Communicating Science Clearly resource from our task force agency, the CDC. You'll be hearing from Sarah in just a moment. You'll see here an example in the description where I mentioned before about if you need to set up an account. You'll see an example here in the description of needing to set up a free account in order to use this particular training. And Sarah will touch on this as well. But here's just an example of that. There are also on each landing page evaluation resources where applicable, links to funding opportunities for particular areas if applicable. And finally, each page has real-world examples with links to more about specific projects that have been undertaken by communities and institutions across the country. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Bedrosian from the CDC to talk more about the financial literacy resources on the site. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you, Catherine. I believe you meant to say health literacy. Is that correct?
I did. My script from yesterday. I'm so sorry.
Because I'm not really
health literacy
100%
resource.
prepared for financial literacy today. So thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really, really happy to be here. My name is Sarah Bedrosian. I am in the Office of Communications at CDC, and basically, I've been a very proud member of the Information Literacy Task Force for, it might be over almost 2 years now, but it definitely feels like it's been a nice journey, and it's really been very exciting to see the process behind the scenes in terms of, and maybe you all have been part of some of that process in terms of like the community engagement that went into the development of this resource to make sure that it's useful. And I think that that approach will continue. So it's really great that you're here today and that you're going to stay involved and let us know what we could do better and what you need. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. If I can figure out how to, there we go. And I will share the information literacy screen. And hopefully you're now seeing it. So basically, here's our homepage. And there are many ways to get to all the information that you might need. As Catherine mentioned, this is a really great site in terms of being able to, if you don't know what you're looking for, it can help you find what you're looking for, like lead you in there with some recommended resources, but you can also go right to the resource section as well as the search feature if you're pretty sure you know what you're looking for. So basically, I'm going to go to the resource section and I'm going to choose health literacy because that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And basically, just as Catherine said, there's a nice definition here. And I would just add that for CDC, our definition of health literacy, and for HHS, also the Health and Human Services, which is our parent organization in the federal government, basically, we look at health literacy as a two-part definition. So we're not just focused on the ability of a particular group that we're trying to reach or trying to communicate with in terms of their ability to be literate or to understand what we're saying. We also look at organizational health literacy, which is when the organization, and in this case, CDC, we really try to make things more clear and easy for people to understand so that they don't we're not focusing on a deficiency. We're also looking at ourselves and trying to make sure we're very clear, because we do know that when people, especially in an emergency, and in CDC, we're often involved in emergency health responses, basically people's ability to take in information goes down. And so as a result of that, if we make our information extremely clear, if we use active voice, and if we put our main message first and try to not have a complex message, but rather a simple message, that is what's going to help everybody understand our information, especially when they're panicked, when they're rushed, when they're trying quickly to find the information that they can actually use to make themselves healthy and keep themselves safe. So, yes, there are many things that we're doing at CDC and at HHS in terms of reaching people who are medically underserved or who are in rural areas, perhaps people whose first language isn't English. We've just been part of a launch of a language access plan that includes ASL and basically like making information clearer for people. So it's really, this is not only the law for us, this is also like a scientific imperative to make sure that our information is as clear as it can be, and it's a work in progress. So anyway, basically, this is something that you can yourselves use to make your messages clearer, as well as helping people also to understand this and to use some of these tools. So I'll just scroll down the page a little bit. And I'd just like to mention that I wanted to thank Catherine for highlighting our Communicating Science Clearly course. That is a 3-hour self-guided course that is free to anybody. And even though it says it's focused on public health professionals, we really consider all of you to be part of our team. You're on our team in terms of we need you to think of yourselves in the same way, like you are all carrying out the mission of helping the American public. So we really thank you for that. I really encourage you to take that particular class. It's self-guided and it's very easy. You can stop it and start it. It's 3 hours long, but it's fun. So I really do encourage you to take that one. And then I would just want to take a couple of looks here in terms of like some of the CDC resources that we have. We have this other course that is on, our site. This is basically our main health literacy site. There are tons of tools on here. The Communicating Science Clearly course, you can find it right here. There's also health literacy for public health professionals. As I said, I do consider you all to be part of our team of public health professionals, because you are on our front lines working with the public, and you are just so important. So when you click on one of these, you'll see that it will take you to CDC Train. And if you don't have an account, you need to create one, but it's free. And once you do this, you don't have to keep logging in. If you set it up that way, you can just go on in. So basically, there we go. Let's go back. So here's the other course, the Health Literacy for Public Health Professionals. We'd love for you to take that one as well. And I do think that these courses are extremely empowering. They will help you to feel more confident when you're speaking to a person or in front of a group. You know, they will help you to feel like you're your very best. I really think that they will be helpful for you. But please let us know if there's anything that could be done to make it better. Basically, we also have a plain language resource site, which is basically has a lot of resources. It has tools that you can use. These are free. There's everyday words, which lets you it's like a jargon buster. It basically is like a thesaurus for, I want to get rid of this jargon in all of ours, but I don't know what's the appropriate word or wording to use to replace. This thing can help you. It's really great. We're always updating it. We have some examples of plain language materials, including information for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and care providers. So if you wanted to create some materials, but you weren't sure that you had ever seen something like that, you can take a look. There's a nice plain language checklist that helps you. These are really the basics for health literacy. If you apply all these to all of your writings and your speaking, you will do really well. So I will go back and back again. And then this is something that this is a Johns Hopkins playbook for addressing health misinformation. I know this is an incredibly important topic for all of you because health misinformation does reduce trust. People just don't know what to believe when they hear all sorts of contradictory information. So this resource was actually funded by CDC, and we worked closely with them to develop this. And I think this would be really, really helpful for you. It has a lot of great information in it. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And we also have a visual communications resource, which basically gives you some help for figuring out the best way to make a visual image that gets your point across. And there's information here about making data talk from the NIH, you know, equity and awareness and data visualization and teaching patients with low literacy skills. So I really think this would also be a very useful resource. So that's why we wanted to highlight it for you. And then if at the end of the day, you're like, well, this is great, but I don't know exactly what I need, but CDC said they had something. Well, then you can just go up to the search button and you can ask for CDC. And then all the resources we just looked at are right there. And I know that as time goes on, the task force will continue to change and add materials as they become available. So I encourage you to keep looking at this resource. I think it's going to be a great one, but we really do want to hear how it works for you, how it doesn't work. And I think with that, I will say thank you and pass it back to Catherine, correct?
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much for going through all those great resources, Sarah. There's so much great stuff out there from CDC in particular.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Howard from the FDIC to talk more about financial literacy and some of the resources on the site. Ron?
Okay. Thank you very much, Catherine. Well done. And I'm going to, no, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is take the, let's try it again. Let's try to share my screen and let us actually share it. So now you should see it, right, Catherine? Okay, so here we go. Thank you for the opportunity. By the way, I am LS, and my name is Ron Howdigi, and I'm with the FDIC. You may have heard that nomenclature before. We're the ones who insure your savings accounts at banks. And you'll see us featured on this website along with other resources. So why financial literacy, and why is it component of this platform? Well, the market says there's for every $15 worth of advertising on financial products and services, there's about $1 worth of real education. That includes anything from instructor-led curricula to posters. So there's a disparity in the ratio. What you'll find on this component of the website, though, you won't see any propaganda. You won't see any encouragement of one product over another, one service over another, one company over another, one bank over another. It is basic, neutral, non-biased information meant to empower folks and to increase their financial capability.
So FDIC emphasizes these resources as really much needed unbiased information for consumers across the country. I'm going to go through a few of them here. There is the Money Smart program, which is a financial education curriculum designed to help people of all ages enhance their financial skills and create positive banking relationships. I believe that's, nope, I forgot to close that one and that one. There we go. Money Smart. So there's a variety of products for an array of different sort of constituencies here. You can learn how to teach financial literacy to others for grade school age to older adults. Some of the resources are geared towards teachers who are trained to teach, and others are geared for people who are not professional instructors or certified teachers, but still might want to teach teach people in their communities. So that's one great resource. The sort of accompanying piece, there's an accompanying piece which includes some more sort of games and other resources. How money smart are you? Which is a suite of interactive games based on the Money Smart program that sort of accompanies it. There is also the mymoney.gov, which is a resource from the Financial Literacy and Education Commission, or FLEC, which is made up of more than 24 federal entities that coordinate and collaborate to strengthen financial capability and increase access to financial services for all Americans. And this commission includes several InfoLit task force members, including the FDIC. And there is some great information for researchers, for teachers, for others looking to learn more, especially about empowering youth for doing this work and trying to help in this space. There is also FDIC's Consumer Resource Center, which complements sort of basic financial literacy, providing information and resources to educate and protect consumers, promote economic inclusion, and connect people with financial resources and their communities. That is right here. Consumer Resource Center. So that is FDIC's, and that has, just even something as basic as how to submit a complaint or figure, how to get help. As I mentioned, they are, but we know that fraud is a huge problem, and they are committed to helping in that space. There is also FDI resource Get Banked, which is here on the consumer resource page itself, but is also right here on our site. It's a collaboration with financial institutions, local governments, and community organizations to raise awareness about the benefits of bank account ownership. So that is available in a couple of different places. And back on our site, that's all under resources to use and share. There are also under training resources for professionals. There is also this. It's a survey. It's a 2021 national survey of unbanked and underbanked households that the FDIC held. And this is also Get Banked. Here we go. This is really interesting. You can find the results and the key findings and the implications of this national survey from a few years ago, which may help you to understand your community better, community needs better, and is a really interesting resource for being able to do that. And finally, for this section, under real world examples at the bottom, there's an example from the Money Smart newsletter about Friends Against, from a couple of years ago, but it's about Friends Against Fraud, which is a workshop created by the Elder Justice Committee in Guilford County in North Carolina, and their work to teach older residents how to protect themselves and their friends from becoming victims of fraud. So that is the financial section. I'm going to now turn to the digital literacy section. So this is the final focused literacy area. And I know many of you are involved in the digital literacy space. This is the ability to use the internet and other digital tools to find accurate information and apply that information to our own lives. And I know this comes up overlapping with sometimes with media literacy, as we are confronted with more and more AI every day. This is a very important and growing area as well. So these digital literacy skills that are highlighted on the site can help to give everyone the skills they need to navigate online information. So we have here, same structure, lesson plans to help students, teach students of different ages how to evaluate information online. I mentioned earlier, this is under resources to use and share. I mentioned earlier a graphic novel about mis and disinformation, which is available here. This is developed by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, or CISA, which is another task force member agency. And this can be paired with their fact sheets. Got it pulled up here. Tactics of disinformation fact sheet as well, which is quite lengthy, but it does complement the graphic novel. And CISA does a lot of work in the mis and disinformation space, particularly online. So there's some great resources here as well. Back on the landing page, training resources. And under real world examples, I wanted to point to the Digital Navigators Toolkit. This is an IMLS funded project, which many of you may be familiar with. Salt Lake City Public Library's Digital Navigators program that helps low-income older adults and families get set up with devices, learn basic digital skills. And this is a way that you can apply these lessons to developing your own digital literacy programming. And now that we've looked through all the different literacy areas and types of resources available, I want to draw your attention to the last tab that we haven't delved into yet, which is the Journey to Information Literacy tab here. So this includes also training resources for professionals, as well as community engagement materials, which we'll get to as we go through here. So building on some of what we heard during our convenings and listening sessions last year, we wanted to provide a bit of a guide for approaching this work. If this is something that is new to you and or your institution, or if you are just trying to tackle something new, even if you have done some work already in this kind of space. So as we all know, journeys are messy, and you may be entering this journey at different points. So the steps and guidance on this page are intended to be adapted for where you are, what you need, and for what you are trying to do. We also understand you may be joining the journey at different points, depending on what you are trying to do. And the resources and toolkits available on the rest of the site that we just looked over are intended to help you in each of these steps. So for those of you working continually in the sort of general community engagement space, the steps on this journey here on the left, the nav bar on the left, will not be unfamiliar. So the first step is to know your community, learning about your community needs. Second is design and approach. Third, develop partnerships and find funding. And fourth, evaluate and sustain information literacy efforts. So if we go down the page, you will see that each step on the journey has details about how other institutions tackled this work, called real life examples. And that shares a little bit more detail about how different institutions sort of addressed these particular steps as they went through. Another important set of resources on this journey page are these special additional resources that you can adapt for your own programming. So I want to take a moment to talk about these. These are the tools to teach, tools to engage. These are the same from this drop down up here. So the tools to teach, there you go. Tools to teach takes you to the training resources for professionals page. This page has sample lesson plans and accompanying worksheets available as both PDFs and Word documents, the latter so you can edit them according to what you need. I've downloaded the examples of the financial literacy lesson plan here, so you can see it's about 9 or 10 pages for each one, with different lesson plans that you can tailor. And then an accompanying worksheet that includes, depending on which type of resource it is, which area of literacy it is, different sort of checklist kinds of information, and also each one has a sort of quiz with answers that allows you to as a partner to the lesson plan. And again, these are all also available as Word documents that you can edit for your own use. There is also a partnership engagement tip sheet. Close these out here at the bottom. And this, I want to take a moment on this because I know many of you, I think, engage with partners all the time. And so some of this is going to be sort of basic information that you may already feel like you know. There is also, and if you don't, then please use it. There are also, though, unique to this particular specific suggestions for particular literacy types as well. Some of them connect to some of the resources we've talked about today, and some others that are specific to this site or included on this site, I'm sorry. Or suggestions of particular types of partners that you might want to reach out to. For example, for under financial literacy, many banks have community outreach programs because banks also want us to trust the financial system. So if you haven't reached out to banks, there may be some in your community that might be helpful. And the same, there are specific suggestions for health literacy partners and ways to reach out. Or suggestions for reaching out in different areas there. At the bottom here of this tip sheet, there is also a template for an email to reach out to a potential partner, if that's something that is helpful for you, to be able to have something to start with to adapt to what you're doing. So that is this partner engagement tip sheet at the bottom here. The tools to engage here takes you to the community engagement materials, which is this drop down here. This page has a wealth of items to use in communicating about information and other literacy programming that you might be doing. So there's an information literacy project FAQ about this initiative. There is also this real versus fake information checklist and how to spot trustworthy information online fact sheet. Those are here. So here is the fact or fiction, the fact sheet for spotting trustworthy information, and the accompanying checklist. That's just a sort of easy resource to be able to use. So both of those are available here. And there are a lot more materials that you can adapt for your own programming, including flyers here. We know that not everybody is communicating about your programming only online. Many people still need flyers, paper flyers to put up in your institutions or around your communities, and that's the best way to reach your audiences. So these are Word document flyers that you can use and adapt. There's also a marketing email template that you can adapt, and draft social media messaging, which then accompany graphics, whole variety of graphics here for Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment so I can pull up some of those examples. They download as JPEGs, so I had to do that. Here we go. So these are the different examples of social media graphics, different types with our branding and information about InformationLiteracy.gov. And I just want to note about all of those adaptable materials on that community engagement site, part of the site, that they are all in the public domain. So they are available for you to edit and use as you would like. They all have, as I just noted, the InformationLiteracy.gov website and the IMLS logo on them. So you don't need to cite your source materials or acknowledge us in any other way. You are just free to use them. They are there for you to use. So that's it for our overview, and we now have time for some questions. I know some of you have been putting questions into the Q&A, and I'll turn to those now. If you haven't yet and would like to, please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. And I'm going to get started. If there are ones related to Sarah, we'll ask her to come back on, but I'm going to just sort of get started. I see some questions about sort of what's coming next and what we might be doing next, or at least some questions that I can address by talking about what we might be doing next. I talked quite a bit about different age groups. At this time, there is no way to filter by age group. Somebody asked that question, but that is something that we are actively considering. I've heard that from a couple of different people and places, that is a useful thing. So we're going to be looking into doing that, because I think that's I think that is, as we are, as we're moving forward and getting more and more resources, that's something that could be really helpful. So we will be doing that. We are actively updating the site. When I was first preparing for this last week, we had fewer than 100 resources. When I checked again yesterday, we have over 100. So we are adding, every month, we are adding more resources. We are also actively working on adding non-language, both the content of the site and resources that link from the site. I'm going to pull back up my screen so I can show that again. So going back to the beginning of the presentation, under the resource database, you may remember there are ways to filter by resource languages. So these are the languages that what we are linking to are available in. You'll notice a lot of English, some Spanish, and then some smaller numbers of other items. We are actively working to also include more non-English resources that we are linking to. We are also close to having the site itself be available in Spanish at the click of a button. And that would be everything that is on the site that we control on the site itself, all of the language around journey, resources, community spotlights, all of that will be available in Spanish as well. If you have suggestions about resources, please feel free to contact us about that. I can note here, there's a contact us form that's available both in the header and also in the footer. And as you can see here, you can also directly email infolit@imls.gov. We'll share that again at the end, but that is available. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the potential resources go through this resource evaluation process before we put anything on the site. But if you have something that you'd be interested in sharing or think would be good, please do that. Some of the other areas that we're kind of interested in exploring, this gets again to kind of where we think we're going. We have a lot of we've had a lot of interest in science literacy, and the EPA game of energy choices that I shared at the beginning is one of those that we already have on the site. Beyond health information, sort of science literacy more generally. Sometimes that's getting into climate literacy, planetary literacy, environmental literacy, but thinking about science literacy more generally is an area that we're actively moving into, adding more resources and really focusing in on a definition of that and sort of thinking about how we include that more concretely on the site. We're also thinking in the sort of civic literacy space, civic education and civic literacy, which gets to sort of foundational ideas around how we live in society, right? And can address some of the mis and disinformation in that kind of space. Let me see. Somebody asked about whether the URLs will be available after the presentation. They are all on the site. So we are recording this webinar. We had held another one yesterday afternoon that we also recorded. We will be posting those on our YouTube, on IMLS's YouTube channel, and then soon, hopefully, putting them on the InformationLiteracy.gov site itself. So that you can review if there are specific areas that you want to go back to what we talked about. You can see that, but they are also all available on the site itself. Question about editing options for the lesson plans. Yeah, somebody doesn't have Microsoft Word. Good point. We will be thinking more about what format might be helpful in terms of all of those resources that we are intending to have you use and edit. We'll take that under consideration, because that's a great point. If that's the intention and you can't do it, we need to make sure that we're addressing that. And I see some more specific questions about rural communities. Interesting. I'm trying to see if there's any other. I don't see any other questions that I haven't answered yet, I hope. Let me see what happens for this rural question. Let me see what happens if I type in rural. Let's see if there's anything there. It's not a checkbox yet, and that's something else that might be a filter, rather. That might be interesting for thinking about community types. It might get complicated, but I think but it is something worth considering for those of you who might be coming from a very specific type of community, that having that easily findable would be very good. Yes, I remember this one. So this popped up with a few different resources. And I know the person who's asking worked for a history organization, so I'm not sure that will necessarily help. But I know that there are a few different places where rural is called out. And I'll inquire about, you can also reach out to us directly, and I'll see if there are other rural resources, particularly for history organizations, that we could point you to, since these are the only ones popping up here. This Leap into Science is this is the community spotlight that I actually talked about too. So this might be interesting. It's not history related, not sort of civics related, potentially depending on what you're interested in. But this may have some connections to some of those particular rural needs. I'm gonna see, I don't see other questions. Please ask them. We have a few minutes. We can also just wrap up as soon as we're ready. But I just want to make sure we do get anybody's questions answered.
I'm seeing some questions. I'm going to sort of start from the bottom, but I'll skip around a little bit. Somebody has some questions about the Word document for the worksheet and other things. How do we give credit to the original document that we provided? That is a great question. And you are absolutely allowed to adapt the resources. I believe, and perhaps one of my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if you adapt it, you can still include InformationLiteracy.gov at the bottom, which still gives us sort of credit for, or takes the user to our site, which still sort of connects it to the overall initiative. So I would say that's a good one on that. Couple that I pulled out already. I believe I answered the question about open access and proprietary. So I hope I answered that question. Let me know if I didn't. We're definitely moving, mostly in open access. Let's see what else we've got. Some specific questions about translation. Great question. So you may have noticed when I was sharing the resource database, go back to that for just a moment. there is a drop down for resource languages. So for the resources that are linked on the site, that's what you're searching for here, or what you'd be seeing here, I guess, really. And we are actively working to add more non-English linked resources, because we know that many communities need non-English resources. So we are actively working on that. In terms of the site itself, we are close to having the whole content of the site, not just the links, but all of the navigation, the actual written content on the site, all of the descriptions of the different resources, all of that available in Spanish at the click of a button. So we are actively working on that, and we are close to being able to have that going. The training materials that I've been talking about here, the training resources and the community engagement materials, we are also working on having those translated into Spanish. I'm sorry, into Spanish. We are still exploring sort of how to get into non-English, non-Spanish languages, and are interested in hearing what kinds of what languages might be useful for a large number of people that we could make sure that happens. Let me see. And I see Ron mentioned that your suite of resources can also be tailored. Do you want to speak to that for a second while I search through some more of the chat questions?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. So, and on the latter, Money Smart is also available in a variety of languages. We even have Money Smart for small business in Spanish, if that's to your liking. And to the extent other languages, the more that the Money Smart team hears from professionals such as this audience as to the need for other languages, the more likely we're going to be able to react to that. And so that your important sources of intelligence on what your community needs, and we are eager to hear from you. And aside from that, of course, we'd welcome you to subscribe to Money Smart News, where you could get other sort of tips, promising practices on financial literacy, and join the Money Smart Alliance yourself, or encourage others to join, where you can engage others who are facing the same sort of challenges or have the same objectives in carrying out a financial literacy campaign locally. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That's really helpful. I see a few questions about adapting resources and sort of how to give credit. So we'll make sure that is clear on the site as to how to do that, and what we expect, and what is sort of required. And but generally, as long as you're using it, that's what we really care about. And you are absolutely allowed to adapt resources, whatever resources you're finding on the site. I see a big question that I want to hold on for just 1 second. I see some questions about sort of consider creating a library of images to use to describe the different types of information literacy, which is a really interesting question. Finding images can be a little bit challenging, just like defining any of these things can be challenging, but I like that idea of sort of a library of possible images. I would consider thinking about that, especially as it relates potentially to some of the visual resources that we already have. That would be interesting. And I see a question about information literacy activities useful for school-aged children. And I think a lot of the resources that we see are adult learners at this point, I think, but I know there are some for school-aged children. I think because we've been starting from the museum and library space, we've been really starting from an informal education kind of standpoint, which is not quite your question. But I know that there are resources for varying ages, but a lot of them are in sort of the informal space, not really about real like in-school curricula development and things like that. But there are some resources available for school-age children. If you can't find them, let me know. Our contact, I did not click on our contact, which hopefully is fairly obvious here, but the contact form here is available both in the header and down here in the footer as well. And we're always happy to get some questions that we can answer. So I want to tackle I want to address the big question I mentioned a moment ago. How are we avoiding a deficit mindset with InformationLiteracy.gov and building upon learners' strengths the way that they are already thinking critically in their daily lives? And that is a great question. It is something that we are very mindful of. Even the use of information literacy, right, can imply that that one is not literate if one does not have this information literacy, right? And we don't want that. We want people to feel empowered to learn, and to your point, to build on what you already know, what one already knows in your day-to-day work. So we have been actively addressing that through the language that we use on the site, and just get back to the homepage here, in the language that we use on the site, or at least trying to, and really thinking about that actively and making sure that we are building from a place of strength and how we describe the problem, right? And the challenges, that it is really about not about making anybody feel like they are in a deficit space. I'm not articulating it particularly well right now, but we are very mindful of that, and thinking about different ways to do that as we move forward and expand the resources on the site, and think differently about what we're adding to it. It is top of mind, because I know it's a significant challenge. Let's see. I want to address, I had a couple, actually, we'll stop screen sharing now. I want to address, so I just mentioned that we're thinking about some other areas of focus, and some other resources. We are thinking, and I saw a question about sort of electoral literacy, and which is what made me think of it. We are actively thinking about expanding into the science literacy space. And you will see, as you peruse the site, you will see some science literacy, and there's a science communications resource on there that I highlighted earlier, thinking about how we can address science literacy more broadly than health, into climate literacy, environmental literacy, planetary health literacy, all those, that kind of universe of possible resources. And there is a lot out there. And there are, as I mentioned already, a few on the site that is not really categorized as a separate thing yet. So we are actively thinking about that. And then the other area gets to civic literacy. And we're actively thinking about civic literacy as well. Which allows us to be in a supporting civic engagement space without getting into challenges around elections and politics directly, which we cannot do. And many of you may not be able to do either, but being able to provide resources that allow us to build civic engagement and civic literacy in our communities more broadly. So I hope that answers that question. And also thinking about how often we are updating. We are adding resources every month. Actually, when I looked this morning, I realized we had added, we are now over 100 resources. We were almost at 100 last week, and now we are over 100. So we are actively adding resources every month. And we are doing bigger updates on a not a quite as regular basis, thinking about new areas of literacy, as I just mentioned, and making changes to anything that doesn't quite work. All of that is either on a rolling basis, or the bigger stuff will be on a more sort of quarterly basis.
All right, I think somebody asked about having the site. Yes, we've got InformationLiteracy.gov in the chat. We can probably pull up the last slide too that has that in it, as well as the email address, InformationLiteracy.gov. I'm sorry, infolit@imls.gov. There we go. And this presentation, as I mentioned, this recording is going to be available on our site. We probably, if there's a lot of interest in having more live webinars for engagement, we will consider that. But we're hoping that that this sort of training and covering covering a lot of the parts of the site will be useful for review. We are also planning to shortly be adding 8 short videos, just 30-second videos on particularly sort of highlighted parts of the site. Also on the same part of the site where we'll be posting these webinars as sort of training opportunities and training ways to sort of understand the site better. So hopefully that will be helpful as well. So you see the link here and the email address infolit@imls.gov with any questions or suggestions or ideas. And I think with that, I don't see any other, and if I missed something, I'm so sorry. Oh, somebody's asking about tweaking the materials and resources. Yes, please tweak away to what you need. You know, we know that you may not be, there's a lot of different ways in which you may need to adapt the materials that are adaptable here. So please do that. And as I mentioned, it does, it has all of the materials that we've provided do include the InformationLiteracy.gov website and IMLS's branding. And that's all you need to do. Just use it to your heart's content, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. And we will be sending out the webinar recording to everybody who registered to attend each of these webinar sessions. So you will be able to share that review if you want to, and share. So thank you so much. If I missed anybody's question, I apologize. Thank you so much, and please have at it. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.